आइए नाज़रीन, अब एक अहम मुद्दे की बात करते हैं। अमरीकी अखबार वाशिंगटन पोस्ट में एक बड़ा मुफस्सल मजमून आया जिसके अंदर बताया गया कि दहशत गर्दों ने अमरीकी असला जो अमरीकी छोड़ गए थे अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर कैसे इस्तेमाल करना शुरू किया है पाकिस्तान की फ़ोर्सेस के ख़िलाफ़। इस असले की अगर आप मालियत देखें तो $7 बिलियन के करीब असला अमेरिका ने अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर झोंका और उसके बाद छोड़ के चले गए, और दुनिया का जदीद तरीन असला है। अब ये हत्थे चढ़ा हुआ है दहशत गर्दों के, उन इंतहा पसंद तंजीमों के जो अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर से ऑपरेट कर रही हैं पाकिस्तान के ख़िलाफ़। अफ़गानिस्तान के अंदर जो हुकूमत मौजूद है उसको इस चीज़ को रोकना चाहिए था, लेकिन नहीं रोक पा रही। वाशिंगटन पोस्ट की रिपोर्ट ने बड़े वाज़ेह अंदाज से बताया कि पाकिस्तान के लिए कितना बड़ा चैलेंज है। अब हमारे पास एक अमेरिकन एक्सपर्ट मौजूद हैं, लॉरी Watkins. She is an expert in these matters and she is joining us via Zoom from the States. Thank you very much for being with us, madam.
Thank you for having me.
Just quickly, your reflections on this article, because we are on the receiving end of it, and obviously we get to speak to officials here and they tell us all about the new surge and the new surge which is driven by this equipment that was made in the USA but left over in Afghanistan, and now terrorists are using it. How big an advantage can it be for groups such as the ones that are attacking Pakistan and also creating mayhem here?
Well, greetings to your viewers, and thank you for having me on your program. Well, the entire withdrawal by the Biden administration was, most call it an absolute failure. And I did work on the receiving end of receiving Afghan evacuees that we had transported on those C-17, C-30s into the United States. There are still, before I get into your questions, there are still thousands of SIV green card holders that deserve to come to the United States, that gave intelligence, that served in the military alongside our U.S. Men and women in service, that they provided intelligence to, like I said, put their lives on the line, their families, etc., where it is absolutely unsafe for them to have remained in country. That is first and foremost, I will say, that is an ongoing effort with advocates working every single day here in the United States to get those people here to the United States. With that said, we are very aware that everything left behind, including human beings, as well as the collateral, as well as weaponry, as well as machinery, weapons, airplanes, aviation tools, etc., that those remain, that the United States military did not remove all of those. That I will now transition into the Trump administration. The Trump administration has made it very clear that they don't intend to put any priority or focus on that part of the region in Afghanistan. And that is extremely concerning to our allies, as well as the adversaries in the region, who know that this is just now a hotbed for terrorist organizations to thrive, and leading into your question, to use the weaponry that was left behind, because they can find ways to use it, and they have begun to use that against the Pakistani military and defense forces, which is causing quite a problem. I understand also that they want the United States and President Trump to acknowledge this, to make some kind of a negotiation, to even have a seat at the table to start to talk about whether or not they will support removing these weapons, so further damage and threats, not just to the national security and domestic security of Pakistan, but again to the entire region, and that it behooves our own national security here in the United States. Unfortunately, the president is very focused on this America First policy and agenda that he has, where he's offering this scorched earth approach to not just the United States adversaries, but our own allies, treating them as I have never seen in my lifetime, in over 22 years of working in this space and international affairs, etc., seeing diplomatic and diplomacy just completely pushed to the side, and stomped on, if you will.
I can assure you,
relationships
neither have
ruined.
we seen this kind of a scene from outside. U.S.-Pakistan ties have been very deep, up and down included. So obviously we have a very keen eye on what's happening inside the U.S. and we're just as baffled as you are, who has a ringside view of it. But back to your take on Trump administration. Trump administration did raise the issue of the leftover weapons. In fact, it was in February that in a cabinet meeting, this was raised by President Trump himself. It is from then onwards that the debate in Pakistan has also started that perhaps the U.S., while it kind of rolls back its foreign policy footprint and, turns its traditional ties upside down, may have a special interest in getting these weapons back. What's your assessment of that?
Well, you're exactly right. Only if Donald Trump finds that it is an asset or that it would benefit him in some way or as it equals the United States. But it's really about Donald Trump and whether or not he thinks that there's any value to these weapons. If he does, then he would be more inclined and put muscle behind this priority to either have his special envoys get involved, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, etc., to get involved in these efforts to bring those weapons back. But that, I think, is a very important question that the Pakistanis need to be raising. At first and foremost is what is going to yes, we want you to remove them, but who is then going to be given the weapons? Whose hands are they then going to be put into? Will it be more beneficial to the Pakistanis, the people and entity that the United States has in mind or that they're willing to negotiate? That should be concerning to the Pakistanis, is whose hands will they now get into? That's a question that I turn back over to you all.
I think that's a central question. Another way to probably address the same concern as to where the weapons ought to go and who is to collect them and who is to receive them is to perhaps put some responsibility and pressure on the government inside Afghanistan. Of course, the U.S. doesn't recognize it, neither does Pakistan, but the world continues to engage with them. And the U.S. continues to send funds across as well. The government was supposed to be a custodian of these weapons. They were given these weapons or they inherited these weapons or they got hold of these weapons. Whatever the case might have been, the ground reality is that they were supposed to look after these weapons. But somehow, through the maze of Afghanistan's tough terrain, these weapons continue to find their way into the hands of terrorists. Perhaps one way to handle it is to put more pressure on the Taliban regime. What's your take?
Well, yes, I have noticed that the Trump administration has kind of had a hands-off approach when it comes to the Taliban. Now, that's different than how they're negotiating or using Israel as a proxy to deal with Hamas, etc., and go after those terrorist groups or the Houthis. But we've seen a different tone when it comes to the Taliban. And that goes back to they were at the negotiating table, remember, when it was even decided about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when Joe Biden carried out a Trump policy. Now, I acknowledge the way that that was handled was not at all ideal, and we are still dealing with the ramifications of that Biden withdrawal. But that policy was put into place by Donald Trump. So we have to remember that and not forget about his attitude and policy then and what that could mean for now. Yes, if he's willing to try to work as an ally and remind the people that the United States and Pakistan have once been trusted partners as far as national security and technology and international cultural exchange, etc., and that they are not the slaves to the United States as has been a sentiment, since 2020 and the withdrawal. I understand that very, very deeply, that is a concern, and the temperature and tone of most of the people there, and there are people that are using that animosity and feeling towards the United States to amplify their own message within your country, and that is understandable to some extent as well. But we see when there is no leadership, that authoritarianism wins. And so I will just go back to, if Donald Trump finds that this is a benefit to him and that he sees the value in any of this, I think that he'll move forward. But he's always going to be about a deal. And who's sitting at the table is the biggest question. Will it be members of the Taliban? Will it be the Pakistani military, police, defense forces, etc.? Will it be other terrorist organizations or their proxies? That is one of the most important questions that those of us who analyze this and are practitioners of this are focused on.
Thank you so very much for being with us. The operative word in your assessment is if. And this if is as big as the Himalayas. So let's see if the if translates into some sort of a hands-on approach, because we are dealing with a pretty grim situation here. Again, thanks a lot for joining us. नाज़रीन, हमारी तरफ से ये कुछ इजाज़त चाहते हैं. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़.